Dear students, today we are going to discuss about the phases of teaching: pre-active, interactive and post-active. Introduction. Teaching is an interactive process and its special function is to impart knowledge, develop understanding and skill. It is indeed a complex task. For performing this task, a systematic planning is needed. It is to be considered in terms of various steps, and the different steps constituting it are called the phases of teaching. To obtain a complete description of the teaching activities of a teacher, one has to consider what a teacher does before and after his regular teaching in class to make teaching most productive. Teaching is a relationship which is established among three focal points in education: the teacher, the student, and the subject matter. It is a process by which the teacher brings the student and the subject matter together. Teaching is not only telling and testing, but it is a complex art of guiding students through a variety of experiences and activities towards the attainment of goals. The anatomy of teaching. Teaching consists of three variables which operate in the phases of teaching and determines the nature and format of learning conditions or situations. Number one, teacher as an independent variable. The teacher plans the role of the independent variables. Students are dependent on him in the teaching process. The teacher does the planning, organizing, leading, and controlling of the teaching for bringing about behavioral changes in the students. The second variable, that is students. Now, students as independent variable. The student is required to act according to the planning and organization of the teacher. Teaching activities of the teacher influence the learning of the students. The third variable, that is content and methodology of presentation as intervening variables. The intervening variables lead to interaction between the teacher and the students. The content determines the mode of presentation: telling, showing, and doing, etc. Now, coming back to the three phases of teaching. Teaching being defined as an interactive and dynamic process, a number of activities precedes actual teaching, and the process involves numerous actions as well as many actions that follow up actual classroom teaching. In 1966, Philip Jackson distinguished between the pre-active and interactive phases of teaching, and thus phases of teaching is also called Philip Jackson's analysis of teaching. The three phases of teaching are: number one, pre-active phase; number two, interactive phase; and number three, post-active phase. Let's discuss each phase in detail. Pre-active phase. This phase is exclusively related to the analysis of the teaching task at the time of planning. In the pre-active phase of teaching, the planning of teaching is carried out. This phase includes all those activities which a teacher performs before classroom teaching or before entering the classroom. Pre-teaching consists essentially of the planning of a lesson. The planning of a lesson needs to be seen in a broader terms, not merely the designing of a lesson plan. Planning includes identifying the objectives to be achieved in terms of student learning, the strategies and the methods to be adopted, use of teaching aids, and so on. All the activities that the teacher does before entering the class are included here. For example, preparing lesson plans by the teacher is a pre-active phase of teaching. The success of the interactive phase entirely depends on it. It includes all the activities the teacher does before he has a face-to-face meeting with the students. There are 4 operations in the pre-active phase: formulation of instructional objectives, making decisions about the subject matter, arrangement of ideas of teachings, and development of the teaching strategy. Now, giving a brief idea of these 4 operations. The first one, formulation of instructional objectives. The preliminary task is related to why a teacher is to teach in the class, what knowledge the students will receive in 40 to 50 minutes period is called objective of the teacher. The objectives are formulated by keeping the following points into considerations. Number A, mental level and socio-economic background of the students. B, standard of the lesson and the class. C, resources available in the class. D, environment and its aspirations. And E, the socio-political philosophy of the nation. The second operation is making decisions about the subject matter. After determining the objective, the subject matter through which these objectives will be realized is selected. It includes 4 main decisions: what information, what concepts, what skills, and the structure of the content. The third operation is arrangement of ideas and style of teaching. Here, the selected content points are arranged and sequenced. The appropriate style of instruction for each point are thought and developed. For example, lectures, group discussions, instructional materials, follow the maxims of teaching and appropriateness, etc. Now, the fourth operation here is development of the teaching strategy. This includes overall teaching strategy to give a final look and revise what to perform in the class. Different strategies and techniques are selected for different elements of the subject matter, and sometimes a combination of strategies are applied for the purpose. Selection of the strategies and techniques also depends on the age and psychology of the students. For example, if the content can be explained by storytelling and opposite word techniques, the first is useful for children of smaller age and the later is effective for those of the higher age. Now we are taking up the second phase, that is the interactive phase. According to Jackson, in the interactive phase, the teacher provides pupils verbal stimulations of various kinds, makes explanations, asks questions, listens to students' responses, and provides guidance. This stage or phase is the lengthiest one as well as the most important one. There is face-to-face interaction. This is teaching in action. Generally, these activities go on according to the plan of the pre-active phase. Some modifications are, however, allowed if the need arises. The operations involved in this phase may be identified as follows. A. Sizing up the class. B. Diagnosis of the learners. C. Treatment given to the students. Now let's explain a bit about each of these operations. Sizing up of the class. As soon as a teacher enters a class, he throws a bird's eye view on the class and he comes to know in a moment the following things. What is the size of the class? Who are the students who will cooperate with him during teaching? who are those who will be creating problems for him. On the other hand, students also try to weight the teacher visually. That is, what is the word of their teacher? This operation refers to the activity of perceiving the size of the class, getting the feel of the mood of the learners. It is being made aware of how many in the group are looking attentive, how many are negligent and disinterested, who are the sharper ones, and who are the troublemakers or slow at learning. The second operative is diagnosis of the learners. After a teacher has assessed his students visually, the teacher gives special attention to the learning needs of the students so that he becomes aware of individual differences, abilities, interests, attitudes, needs, and entering behavior of the students. It is done with the help of direct questions on the content. The third operation is treatment given to the students. When a teacher does some activities by asking questions or by showing some material aids in the class, students react to those stimuli, leading to some responses from the teacher also. That is, reinforcing the students at the proper response. Thus, this process of action and reaction goes on in the class unabatedly. Post-active phase. It is a phase of evaluation and follow-up of the operation at the pre-active and the interactive phases. Only after the evaluation, the teacher comes to know whether the objectives are achieved or not. The operatives involved in this phase are: number A, determining the exact dimensions of the behavior; number B, using the appropriate testing devices and techniques; number C, changing the strategies of teaching. Determining the exact dimensions of the behavior. Here, the teacher defines or determines the different dimensions of behavioral changes on the basis of the criteria of desirable behavior. The teacher compares the real behavior change of the students with their expected behavior. If there is greater similarity between the two, it is assumed that objectives are achieved. For example, after teaching the lesson on Parliament to the students, the teacher expects that the students must have learned about the functions, houses, and officials of the Parliament. Number B, using the appropriate testing devices and techniques. From the list of available testing tools, those which are suitable for testing the attainment of the terminal behavior are administered. These tools may include different types of paper-pencil tests, standard criterion reference tests, teacher-made informal tests, the aptitude test, and aptitude test skills, etc. Number C, changing the strategies of teaching. The results of the test thus obtained enabled identification of those terminal goals that were not attained or those that were partly attained. By these tests, the teacher comes to know about the achievement of students on one hand, and on the other hand, he can also know the effectiveness of his own teaching strategies. These instruments can also help the teacher to know his shortcomings. When a teacher is unable to identify the terminal goal or behavior, he may again identify his teaching strategy, review his method and teach again, review his class and change the teaching styles, and judge the entry behavior of the students again to reach the terminal behavior. Now, coming to the conclusion, in conclusion, we can say that teaching denotes actions undertaken with the intention or bringing about learning in another. It is effective interaction between teacher and the pupils. It is a professional activity and helps to bring about harmonious development of students. The three phases of teaching, the pre-active, the interactive, and the post-active phase, help to make teaching learning more productive and effective and bring about a positive attitude towards learning. The teacher has to translate the subject matter using skills, methods, and techniques, and thereby generating motivation and morale and assessing the teaching by evaluations, supervisions, and feedback. All the three phases are interrelated and interdependent. Each phase is important so as to make teaching learning a successful event.